which is why I want to ask you, like, did
Mm,
it benefit you knowing a little bit of Japanese when it came to improving your Chinese or vice versa?
that's a really good question. It did, but I think only because I learnt them in a certain order. For me, with French, I'd already spoken it during A levels, and then in my gap year.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to the channel. And as you probably know by now, my name's Lewis, and we have another wonderful guest. His name is Jamie, but I'm not going to do the introducing for him. I'll let him introduce himself. But first, Jamie, how are you?
Great. Well, thanks for having me, Lewis. Very excited to be here, to be on your channel and discover a bit more about the man behind the profile that I've seen for so long on Instagram. Although I guess this is you asking me questions. Maybe when you're on my podcast channel one day, I can ask you the questions. But yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And if you want to ask me any questions, go ahead, by all means. But first, we'll get started with you. So, uh, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Could you introduce yourself?
Good questions. We'll start with the basics. So, my name is Jamie Francis. I'm a pronunciation coach. I work online now teaching private clients and also with the online pre recorded courses. But before that, I was a university lecturer teaching phonology at universities in Paris. So, phonology being the science behind pronunciation. And I was teaching that to students that were studying English studies degrees. So that's kind of what I was doing before this. Now it's just all through podcasts, Instagram, and teaching clients online. And I'm from the south of the UK. I'm from Northampton. Well, kind of a bit a town that's half south, half Midlands. From my accent, you'd think it was in the south, but technically it's the East Midlands. And yeah, I'm from there, but I live in Manchester now, in the north of the UK.
Okay. So, Northampton, would you describe it more as a southern part of the UK, of England, or is it more the Midlands? What would you say?
I'd say because it's so close to London, it's only about an hour away from London on the train. And there are people that live in Northampton that work in London as well. It's kind of a commuter town for London. It does have a lot of southern influence. It's more of a southern town. And for the accent that people have as well, it's a very bog standard RP or estuary English accent. So yeah, it's definitely more southern. But if you want to go by what the maps say, it's the Midlands. Could be either.
Lovely phrase, by the way, bog standard. It's a bog standard accent. If something is bog standard, it's kind of like a negative way of looking at something that is normal. It's basic. It's bog standard. Now,
Nothing to
first,
report about yet.
phonology. Why? At what moment in your life or your childhood or your teenage years did you start to become interested in the science of pronunciation?
Great question. Well, I studied a modern foreign languages degree at university. So I did French, Japanese, and Chinese. But before that, when I was 18, I moved to France for a year. I took a gap year. It was actually because on the university applications for UCAS, I didn't get any of the choices that I wanted for university. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to take something I don't want. Let's just go away for a year, saved up a bit of money, and then did some random odd jobs in France for a year. So as an au pair, I was working in a kitchen as a delivery boy, all of these kind of things, just to improve my French and have some life experience. So basically, it all started there when I was learning French and improving my A level French, but actually on the ground, interacting with real people, realizing that the French that I was taught at school wasn't anything like the French in real life. And even though I was there for a year interacting with French people and I made a lot of progress, became so much more comfortable in French, there was still a lot of occasions that I was having with French people where they didn't understand what I was saying, or they'd ask me to repeat, or something just wasn't translating, something wasn't getting communicated correctly. And it was only when I went to university and studied phonology, French phonology, as part of my degree, that I realized that pronunciation and phonetics was actually the key that I'd been missing. As soon as I learnt the sounds and the stress patterns, um, how they were different in French and English, when I went back to France after university, and when I had friends at university, French friends, that was when I realized that I could speak a lot more fluidly, more confidently, and I wasn't having these miscommunication problems. So that kind of planted the seed for me of, okay, phonology is great. I wasn't planning to be an English teacher at the time. It was a few years later when I sort of redirected my career, became an English teacher. Then we had phase two, which was teaching business English to professionals in Paris. That was my first English teaching job. And with them as well, even though I was teaching business English and speaking skills, I realized that so many of them were self-conscious of their accents, or again, I wasn't understanding certain things that they were saying because of their pronunciation. And I realized that in the English teaching world, so few teachers focus on pronunciation, despite it being such a key part of speaking. So then that was the second seed that was planted, having my own experience and then as a learner, and then having an experience as a teacher as well. So that's when I decided to go back to university and do a master's in English phonology. And then luck was on my side. From being there, I then got a job at the same university where I'd done my master's, and I started teaching English phonology at the university there. Did that for 4 years. And yeah, that was how I got into phonology, partly as in my experience as a learner, partly as my experience as a teacher.
I mean, it's interesting because before we started recording, we were speaking a little bit about self-employed life, being an entrepreneur, and the business side of things behind being a pronunciation coach or an English language teacher. And a lot of the advice that business gurus will give you is to find a pain point. And if it's something that you have experienced yourself, then you can come at it from a point of view that's much more, I don't know, moving and impactful if you yourself have been through this painful moment of not being understood in France, and then you had the professional background to back it up. It's a match made in heaven, right?
You could say that. I should probably talk about my story more often because I don't actually talk about that very much. So
Now
thanks for
you got a
giving me
new
ideas
marketing
for,
hook.
yeah, Lewis, the content king. Thanks for giving me some new content ideas there. But I don't actually talk about it much. But you're right that if you can relate to your clients' pain points, that and you've been through the same situations as them, it does make you a lot more trustworthy, I think, and it means that I'm able to offer a solution that's more adapted to them and more targeted to them because I know exactly what they've been through. So yeah, great point.
And studying phonology, was it actually interesting? And I'm going to clarify this question because I also studied more modern foreign languages at university, but I went for maybe slightly easier options with Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. So they were all very, very similar. And I didn't really dare to tackle the challenge of Chinese or Japanese. No way. But I always found phonology and phonetics as a little bit dull. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
just me, but for
Mm-hmm.
you, was it interesting?
I can see what you're saying, and I did have some students at university who found it dull. Whether that was a reflection of phonology or a reflection of myself, let's go with saying it's phonology and not me. Because I did also have students that said, "Oh, I hated phonology before you taught it, and now you've made it more fun." So it could be either way, but yeah, I think it depends what your interests are. For me, when I was studying my A levels, so that's the exams that we do in the UK between the ages of 16 and 18 before university, if you're going to university. I was very science focused. I did maths and physics, and I thought I was going on to university to study science. I wanted to study earth sciences and meteorology and become a weatherman, was actually my original plan. Completely different from English
Bit of
teaching.
a pivot.
Yeah. Also, it's not very interesting being a weatherman in England because it's like, okay, today is rain. Yeah. End of the show. You don't have much variation in that job, actually. Bad idea. But it was when I started studying science at A levels, I was doing French alongside it. And that's when I found a love for languages. So for me, because I'm kind of science, I have that science part of my brain. I'm like kind of science oriented. Phonology kind of fit into that. It was really nice to find some concrete rules and some scientific studies behind language. So I've not been as much into the sort of literature or history sides of language. I was always choosing the scientific sides. at university. So I think for me, but yeah, it does depend on what you're good at and what you're naturally interested in, I think. So for you, it was more like the culture based modules that you're interested in, history or literature, or what
It
was it
was
for you?
mainly just the idea of traveling and the culture as well, but connecting with other people. And I've always liked the idea of kind of acting a little bit, being a bit theatrical. And in that way, you can almost pretend to be someone else when you're using a different language. And that then allows you kind of the passport, the possibility of, getting to know people, uh, using the expressions and phrasal verbs and all of this stuff that you've used, which is why in my kind of content, I usually focus a little bit more on expressions, slang, phrasal verbs, and just the vocabulary rather than the pronunciation. And it's something that I've told myself I could maybe work on in the future to become more of a pronunciation expert. But I don't know
Hmm.
if it's me. I don't know if
Hmm.
it's my kind of vibe.
Well, you don't have to be, a teacher of everything. I'd say quite the opposite is true. You should probably find a lane that you're good at and that you're interested in as well, and then you'll be able to attract clients or students that are interested in that as well. So I don't think you have to be doing everything online. Um, yeah, I think it just depends. I think the other reason why I really like pronunciation and phonology is how closely linked to spoken English confidence it was for me. Well, for me, it was French, but for my clients that I see now, their confidence in English. That if you feel, self conscious with your English speaking skills, and then you learn phonology to improve your rhythm, to improve the sounds, or to learn the sounds that are different between your native languages, phonology, and English. It can give you like a solid base or some ropes to hang on to, and to feel more confident in your spoken abilities. So it's also the link between phonology and confidence for me that makes it such an amazing part of a language learning journey.
Clay. Now, I want to focus a little bit more on your language learning journey. So,
Mm-hmm.
it all kind of starts out properly as an adult on your year abroad in France. Um, was this always the backup plan? So, if you didn't get into your desired university, were you always going to move abroad and spend a year in France?
No, not really. Um, Well, I did enjoy French at school, so during my A levels, and I wanted to study French and philosophy at university. As I said earlier, I didn't get into the universities that I wanted to, so that's when I thought, okay, let's just go and take a year out and have some fun experiences. That's exactly what happened. So, had a year in France, and then after university as well, I knew that I wanted to continue living abroad. I spent a few months in China. I was in Japan for 2 years as well, and then kind of semi settled in Paris for 8 years. Um, Now back in the UK, of course. But yeah, it wasn't really the plan. I think I just let life kind of guide me and, yeah, let the universe decide.
And Paris. Lots of French students that I've had are not Parisian. They're not from Paris. They're from maybe Lyon. They're from Marseille. They're from Bordeaux, or they're from Lille. And it seems like people from other regions of France always, make some little jokes about Parisians. And they claim that people from Paris are a little bit stuck up and arrogant. Um, what do you have to say related to that?
I think that's a very valid point in the sense that people do say that. But as someone who's lived in Paris for 8 years, I am a bit of a Parisian defender. And if ever I do hear comments like that, I will go into defense mode for
Scrabble.
Parisians. Exactly. Because I think it's a bit misunderstood. I think you can draw a parallel with London in that way, or probably most big cities, most capital cities in the world. The pace of life in Paris is so much quicker than in other areas in France, especially smaller cities or in the countryside, that people don't have the time to, maybe be as polite as in other places or as interested. Um, Everyone's a bit busier and life's just a bit harder. Everything's a bit more expensive. It's kind of like London, a typical northerner going to London will say, "Oh, nobody's friendly around here. No one talks to me at the bus stop." I think
The
parallels can
pints
be
are
drawn
so
with that.
expensive.
Exactly. It's the same in Paris. Things are more expensive. People are busier. They might seem a bit more cold, but when I've spoken to people and made friendships or relationships individually, hasn't been like that at all. I think there's just, yeah, more of a culture in Paris of keeping yourself to yourself. And it's just typical big city vibes. It's nothing to do with Parisians, at their core.
Nah, I asked the question, but one of my best friends here in Brussels is from Paris, and
Mm.
he's lovely. He's really friendly, really nice. He's not stuck up at all. So, I'm just being a bit cruel asking these questions. But let's continue with Paris. What for you are the best things about Paris and the best things about your time living in Paris?
That's a great question. I think being in Paris allowed me to take a path that I wanted to take, or to take a path that wasn't typical. Um, you're, for example, going back and studying a master's degree, um, and it's not super expensive. I didn't get myself into tens of thousands of euros of debt. It actually allowed me to sort of reshape my career path. Whereas I know that if I was in England, if I were in England, um, that would have been a little more difficult. So, firstly, being able to advance my career and kind of follow a path that I wanted to. Also, I think culturally, I think there are a lot of elements in France that people are quite they're interested in culture in the sense of people are going to art exhibitions all the time, or museums, reading. And I think that kind of side of France definitely kind of resonated with me as well. That was a really good element, something that I really appreciated when I was in Paris as well. Sometimes in England, if you talk about art or literature, even if you're middle class, people might see it as a little snobby or a little stuck up. Whereas in France, um, talking about culture in that way is not considered snobby at all. Like, I really liked that element of it as well. Another thing that I like about French people is their ability to argue, which on the surface might sound a little negative, but I think that French people are very able to stand up for themselves, whether that's on an individual level, if they're in a shop, or, they have an argument with someone, they're not afraid to say their bit, to stand up for themselves. Also on a larger scale as well, on a wider scale, that, you see the amount of protests that are in France. If the government changed just a little tiny law here or there, French people love to stand up for their rights, and they'll be on the streets, they'll be striking. And I think that's great as well, standing up for yourself. As someone who was maybe a little bit of a people pleaser when I was younger, I think being in France has also taught me to stand up for myself and to stand up for the rights of other people as well. That's been something really positive about living in France that I've brought with me back to the UK.
I mean, we're recording this in May. It's not going to be released until August. So,
You're giving
as I
away the
always
editing secrets there.
I like to get ahead, and I
Mm.
mention this quite a lot, but I thought I'd mention it because it's the end of May, and because I have some French students, I know that May is a pretty good month in terms of public holidays. There are lots of
Mm,
bank holidays and
definitely.
stuff like that. And then whenever I'm asking my students about this and they're telling me about all of these amazing social advantages that they have, it's like, okay, now I understand why you're all striking all the time because you've got to preserve these good things that you've got.
Exactly.
If
Exactly.
people
When
retire when they're 62, it's amazing. I mean, if that's possible to maintain that, win-win, right?
Exactly. You compare that to the UK, where rights get eroded little by little, and everyone's just like, "Oh, that's life." There's nothing we can do about it. So it's definitely something, yeah, to be appreciated in France. Mhm.
uh, do you have any favorite French pastries or dishes?
Mm. Yeah, the pastries, the patisseries in general in France are amazing. Anything with almond in is fantastic, like the croissant aux amandes, things like that. I'm sure they have them in Belgium as well, like the triangle aux amandes, things like that. But generally, you can go into a boulangerie in France and everything's going to be good. You don't really even need to have a favorite. You can just choose anything that's there, and you can be pretty much guaranteed that it's going to be delicious. It can even just be the small one downstairs. It can be, nothing fancy. It's always going to be nice.
No, no. I actually took a photo the other day because I went to the gym and then on my way back from the gym, I just passed by a bakery, and then I was like, "Oh, that smells good." So then I was like, "Oh, go on, I'll get a couple of baguettes." And the fact that I took a photo because I was just like these little things, and this is Belgium. Of course, it's not full France, but there are a lot of French elements.
Yeah, there's
And I
some
was just
influence
like,
there. Yeah.
ah, beautiful, a nice
Hmm.
little baguette.
Yeah, it doesn't
Simple
quite
things,
have the same appeal as walking past a Greg's in England, does it?
unless
Even
we're
if
talking
Greg's,
about sausage rolls.
even if Greg's have their, their strong points, it's not quite the same temptation walking by it.
No, no, for sure, for sure. Now, you didn't just spend time in France. You mentioned that you were also in Japan. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. I was there for 2 years.
Okay. Very different, very far
Very different
away.
indeed. Yeah.
So, how was life there? How would you sum it up?
Mhm. It was an amazing experience again, just like being in France, but completely different. So I'd studied Japanese at university. I'd spent a few years studying it. Then I did a year abroad in Tokyo. So, coming from Northampton, tiny town in the UK, and then being in the biggest city in the world, it was a massive life change for me. And yeah, the first year that I was there, I went to business school for a year. I was on an exchange program. Um, and living with international students and with Japanese people that wanted to practice their English. So that was kind of the dormitory setup for us. It was either internationals or Japanese people that felt international. um, so yeah, that was a fantastic year, a really good experience studying and also improving the language, having lots of different life experiences. And then I went back to work once I graduated for a year as well. That was a bit of a different experience because I was in a very stereotypically Japanese company. I was the only non-Japanese person there. Everything was in Japanese. All of my colleagues were Japanese. So that was more of a culture shock because when you're at university, it's very mixed. There are people of all different nationalities, all different backgrounds. But being the only non-Japanese person in a Japanese company was definitely a more intense experience, a more intense version of that journey. So I lasted about a year there, and then I thought, this isn't really for me. I'm gonna move to France. But actually, I didn't even intend to move to France. I just had a friend that was living there. I went on holiday to visit him, and then I ended up staying on his sofa for a month and then was like, okay, actually, your life looks pretty good here. Let's just move back from Japan and, yeah, get back to Europe.
Okay. And the stereotypical things that I know about Japanese companies is that there is this very intense lack of work-life balance, essentially, where people are socially pressured into working very, very long hours and also maybe going out for drinks with the boss and the other
Exactly.
colleagues after, and you're kind of like expected to fit in and do this. Did you have this experience?
Yeah, I had exactly that experience that I wasn't allowed to leave the office before my boss left the office. So even if I had no work to do and there was no work that he could give me because, I was still a junior, it was still my first few months there, um, I still wouldn't be allowed to leave. So he could be working until 9, 10 p.m. at night and I would just be there doing nothing. Um, Similarly, you'd have to go for drinks after with the company, or um, I was also with one of my colleagues most Sundays teaching him English. That was expected as well. So even on the days off, you're still thinking about the company, didn't really have much free time. But it's not that the system in Japan is bad per se. I think it's just cultural differences. And in Japan in general, they have way more of a community mindset. It's not really an individualistic culture. So people see staying late and, doing things for your boss and working at the weekends, it's really for the good of the whole and the good of the company or the good of society. Whereas in the West, was more specifically the UK and in France as well, we do have more of an individualistic, um, you know, tendency to prioritize. No, it's my life, it's my work balance, and I finish my work at 5 p.m., so I'm going to leave. I don't care if there's more work to do. So yeah, it wasn't that the Japanese companies are bad in and of themselves. It was just me as a British person. It was very stereotypically British. It just didn't work for me. And I just couldn't bend myself to fit into that culture. But the people around me, the Japanese people that were around me doing the same thing, they seemed genuinely happy with that. They were totally fine with that. So yeah, it was just cultural differences, and then having that experience, and then jumping right into French work culture of no more than 35 hours a week, half of May off, all of August off. I was just like, okay, this is more suited to me actually.
I
Let's
mean,
have some time off and more holidays.
I think that's what most people would go for. If you're given the option, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer, right?
Mhm. It was two extreme experiences of no holiday to, yeah, sure, have time off, whatever you want.
And
Probably
in
Britain's somewhere in the middle, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was nice to be back in France after that experience.
And what exactly were you doing in this company? Were you teaching English or something else?
No, I worked in a trading company. So it's called a shosha, and it's like this concept in Japan. That post-war, part of their post World War II, part of Japan's big development was based on these shoshas that are trading companies that deal in many different sectors, many different activities all at the same time, like energy and textiles and all different things at once. And they all were in different sectors at the same time in order to kind of um, keep themselves diverse and to not be battered by any changes of any certain industries. It was supposed to kind of keep them afloat no matter what environmental things happened. Um, so I was working in a smaller one of those, very kind of Japanese concept, and it was in logistics for a fashion company that owned a British fashion brand. So they owned a British suits company, a kind of traditional, British tailoring company. They'd bought them up in the 90s, um, and most of their market was Japan and China and Korea as well. So I was kind of a go between for the English subsidiary. What was the subsidiary at this point, and the Japanese and Asian side. So I was working in the middle of that, doing
Interesting.
logistics, marketing, all sorts of things, really. Because in Japan as well, you're not actually given a job title when you go into a company. You're just called, my job title was new recruit. So anything that they had to do, really, logistics, marketing, sales, it was a bit of everything rolled into one, really. You just become a member of the company and a member of the family. So yeah,
Very different. I did not
it was an
expect
interesting experience.
that.
Yeah, an interesting experience that lasted 11 months. And then I couldn't do any more than that.
No,
But I'm
no.
really glad I had that experience.
I mean, it's something that you'll always remember. It's a story to tell, and now you know maybe what you don't want in terms of holidays, at least. So, it's something that will
Exactly.
stay with you, something that has marked you. And
Exactly.
you mentioned at the beginning that you studied French, Japanese, and Chinese. And I'll ask you about your time studying Chinese, sorry. But in my case, studying Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, it benefited me, but not completely. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because
Mm,
it makes it easier to understand other languages if you already have a base in a similar language, but then you can mix them up and confuse them, and you can be speaking perfect Italian but using Spanish words, which sometimes can happen.
I feel
Uh,
that. Yeah.
I don't know any Japanese or Chinese, so I'm not sure if a similar thing happens, which is why I want to ask you. Like, did
Mm.
it benefit you knowing a little bit of Japanese when it came to improving your Chinese or vice versa?
That's a really good question. It did, but I think only because I learnt them in a certain order. For me, with French, I'd already spoken it during A levels and then in my gap year. So then when I came to study it at university, it was already in my head. I already knew how to speak French. And then that's when I started Japanese from scratch at university. I did that for 1 year, already got to a good level of Japanese in that 1 year. So again, that was kind of cemented in my head. And then I started Chinese just as an optional thing after that for 2 more years. But because I already had a solid enough level in Japanese, I didn't get them super confused. And also with the writing system in Japanese and Chinese, there are a lot of similarities. Basically, there are kind of like three alphabets, if you want, in Japanese. One of them is derived from Chinese. and it's the one with the most characters, with thousands of characters. So when I started Chinese from scratch, even though I didn't have any previous knowledge, I could read basic letters or basic messages and still know what the meaning was based on my knowledge of Japanese characters. So that gave me, a big head start with Chinese, uh, the writing system. And then with pronunciation and with grammar, Chinese is a bit more basic. There aren't really any tenses. You don't conjugate. Um, with pronunciation as well, it's quite a limited system of pronunciation. So the hard bit for Chinese really is writing and reading. And I already had a solid base thanks to Japanese. So yeah, that definitely helped. And I think because the three languages sound so different as well, it's been it was not that hard to not get mixed up between them. However, I've learnt Spanish since then. I haven't done it formally. I just learned it because my dad lives in Spain. So just kind of teaching myself with grammar books and podcasts and stuff. And I do get confused with Spanish. With Spanish and French, the vocabulary and even the pronunciation. I remember one time I was on a train in Spain and I said something like disculpe to someone. And even there, I just said it with more French pronunciation. Because they look so similar in my head, I end up using like a French pronunciation. And the woman on the train said to me, "Oh, de rien," like in French back to me. And I was like, she thinks that I'm French. How does she think I'm French? Because I'm saying the Spanish words with a French accent because I'm getting them so mixed up in my head. So yeah, I think it depends how similar the languages are as well.
I mean, I
Because you get that as well. I mean, with Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, I'm sure there's a lot of crossover there to get muddled up with. No.
100%. And in my case, like my Spanish is pretty much not perfect, but it's fluent, no problem. But my issue is since being at university, I haven't really stayed on top of my Italian or Portuguese. And now it's got to the point where if I do ever speak it, I'll be like hesitating and then kind of like stuttering and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe changing the accent so I sound a little bit Brazilian or I sound a little bit Italian, but then I'll just use Spanish words. And I don't really have a reason to maintain these languages at the moment. Like,
Mm-hmm. That makes
the
sense.
reason is, well, my own enjoyment, I suppose, and maybe to interact with other students from other parts of the world, Italy, Brazil, Portugal. And then when I moved to Belgium a few years ago, I started kind of relearning a little bit of French because I studied it for a couple of years at GCSE, and that's it. Um, but it was
Another
kind of
language to get confused with.
very confusing, but it was useful because I could make up a lot of words in French from knowing Spanish, Italian, English. So I'd be making up words, and sometimes the right word would come from English or the right phrase would come from Spanish. So I'd be kind of like, inventing it as I was having the conversation. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'd be like, oh, is that French? Oh my God, I just said Spanish, but with a French accent. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, this is not going to be the ultimate key. And just by knowing one of these Romance languages, you're not going to be fluent in another one. But it does give you a bit of a head start and allows
Definitely.
you to, be creative. And if you don't know a word, you can guess a word. And the
Mm-hmm.
chances are it'll be similar. Not the
Mm-hmm.
same, but
Or
similar.
you can understand better as well. For communication, you can guess what people are saying. Even now, as someone who speaks, maybe an intermediate level of Spanish and fluent French, when I hear Portuguese, I hear like Portuguese people or Brazilians talking, I can sometimes get a little bit of what they're saying, and it's mind blowing to me that I've never learned Portuguese, but that I can actually sometimes get the gist of a basic conversation just by knowing Spanish and French. So if you've also made efforts to learn the language on top of that, I completely hear what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense.
So I haven't been able to brush up on and stay on top of the languages that I don't use. Are you able to do it? Are you able to stay good in
Mm,
Chinese and Japanese, for example?
Chinese is kind of lost at this point. That was a long time ago, and I didn't have enough time there. I only had 3 months there to cement it, really. And it was just more kind of basic lessons at university. It was just 2 years of lessons. So that really never got anchored into my head. With French and Japanese, I think because I still have friends from both places that I keep in contact with, that's the main way of keeping those languages going. Also, content as well. watching French series or, following people on Instagram that speak in Japanese or whatever. That's been kind of the best way for me to keep the languages up. But I think with each language I've learned, I've had to kind of focus on one at a time. And right now I'm in my Spanish era because I go to Spain to see my dad, and I have a couple of Spanish friends in Manchester as well. So that's kind of my focus at the minute. I'm not this kind of polyglot that can, have a crazy schedule of learning 12 languages at the same time. Each language has kind of came into my life for a period and then taken a back seat whilst I'm learning the next one. Is that the same for you, or have you just learnt them all at the same time? Or
I mean, my story was with Spanish that I was interested in it and did it at A level, so it was already fairly good. And then because I didn't know what to do in life, I did languages because I thought it'd
classic.
open up lots of possibilities. And then I couldn't just study Spanish, so I thought, I love Italy, Italian food, Italian way of life. It's awesome. So I already had a little bit of a base in Spanish. I started Italian. Those were the first 2 years of uni. My Spanish started to get to a good level. My Italian was okay, but it wasn't great because the first couple of years of university, I didn't really study and I was going out a lot and I wasn't really kind of
Yeah,
chasing my goals.
I hear you.
Then a year abroad, that consolidated my Spanish. But then when I went to Italy, I was living with Spanish people. So then it
Okay.
continued to make my Spanish even better, but my Italian just kind of like kept going
Hmm.
without really progressing that much. And then since I graduated, moved to Seville with a Spanish girlfriend, I never really had a group of Italian or Portuguese or Brazilian friends. So I've always maintained them a little bit passively with series and content and stuff like that, but not in an active way through writing or speaking, which I think is necessary. And nowadays, to be honest, my priorities are
Yeah.
more
They
my own
shift.
content and my
Hmm.
own teaching and my own business rather than learning other languages. And there'll even be times before I go to bed where previously I'd do a little bit of language learning. Now I'll do a little bit of editing. So
Hmm.
it's
Exactly. The
kind of,
priorities shift. But at
as
least
you
you also
said,
have,
it's on the
you're
back
having a
seat.
relationship half in Spanish, I imagine. That's kind of the best way to learn a language. Probably shouldn't be saying that as a language coach, but really just download Tinder, find someone that speaks your target language. Number one way. Number two, sure, come to an English coach, pronunciation coach for private lessons. But yeah, if you manage to have a relationship in a language, and you manage to, argue in a language, not saying that you do, but it's a great way to yeah, improve your language
That's the
skills.
cheat code, really. That, of course,
Definitely.
not everybody's able to do it, but if you are, phenomenal. If not, of course, you can learn with the help of expert teachers. So
Hmm.
let's move on
Yeah.
to grow your English. So,
Hmm.
Jamie, we've been speaking about you as a person, your life, language learning, and stuff like this, but at what moment did you start to basically set up your own company and start to have an online presence as a British English pronunciation coach?
Hmm. Yeah. So I started about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And I was just posting short form videos on Instagram and TikTok about pronunciation. And I only actually did that for about 10 or 11 months, gained some kind of presence and, um, made friends in the business kind of, with other English teachers. And I really enjoyed that experience. But at the same time, I was still working at university and working as a university lecturer. So I was always kind of pulled between the two in terms of time and scheduling. And then when I got a promotion at university for my last 2 years that I was there, content creation just kind of fell by the side. And I thought, right, I'm going to focus on my lecturing career. Did that for 2 years. Um, and then, yeah, just last year, I thought, you know what, I think I want to make another go of Grow Your English and maybe be self-employed, move away from France, move back to the UK. That could be a great way to continue teaching pronunciation and phonology. So yeah, that's what I did. I've only been back on Instagram now for about 3 months at the time of recording this. By the time it's out, it will be a bit longer. But now it's all kind of coming together: private students, group classes, online courses, pre-recorded courses, a podcast as well. And now the Grow Your English brand, if you want to call it that, is in full swing. So I'm really happy with how that's turning out, to be honest.
Right. So first, tell me about the podcast, given that we're recording this more or less podcast. So your podcast, what is the aim? What's the goal? What are you looking to do with it?
So my podcast is more monologue style. I will have guests, here and there, but it's really just to zone out for 10, 15 minutes, for learners to zone out for 10, 15 minutes and to really absorb themselves in a topic, listening to their British English pronunciation coach. I also don't just talk about things to do with language or to do with British culture. There's also elements of psychology, of self-development, language as well, business, history, all different topics. So I'd like people to, have something to listen to in an authentic English to improve their language skills, whether that's listening for, purely for listening skills, or I have vocabulary sheets as well that students can download to learn new expressions, or also for pronunciation. Listening is great for pronunciation, for shadowing as well. I wanted to create some content some longer content in my voice for my students to shadow with as well. You can't really shadow with a 30-second Instagram reel, that's try with a hook and a call to action for, trying to get new students. So I thought this is just a nice, relaxed format to be able to create some authentic content for people to listen to and improve their English skills. My first few episodes, the first one is how to be funny in English, where I do a deep dive into, why people laugh, what is humor, what humor translates across cultures and what doesn't. And then also, there are some practical tips in it for how to find your own voice, how to find your own humor in English, and why being a non-native speaker actually is a bit of a superpower for being funny in English. So that's the first episode. The second episode is all about perfectionism in life and in language learning, how to be less perfectionist, and dealing with the stress, the pressure of trying to sound like a native speaker. So yeah, it's about all different things. The podcast.
And it sounds interesting. Feel free, everybody, to check it out. I'm sure by the time that you are watching this, there'll be plenty of episodes that you can
Exactly.
binge on. Um, but I was just remembering something that I very rarely use TikTok. I'll always post my videos there, but I'm not a consumer of TikTok. I never actually use it myself. So then I literally just post my video and that's it. But then a couple of weeks ago, when I was doing it, I saw one of your videos had gone semi-viral, and it was you making 4 or 5 different sounds in English with just
Yeah.
one word, which was "hmm."
Mm.
Um, could you
Like I
explain
just
it?
did
What
there.
what are these sounds? How does it work?
As I'm sure you've realized yourself, Lewis, sometimes it's the most ridiculous videos that go viral. The ones that you think are actually helping people, that are helping people, are the ones that you want to be seen. And then usually it's the one that you just record in, 5 minutes thinking, yeah, sure, I'll just upload this. That's the one that goes viral. It wasn't really helping anyone. And also, I think it got the wrong target audience in the sense of it got pushed to a lot of native English speakers, which is never good as a language learning, as a language teacher, But yeah, it went viral. I was just teaching the differences between the in English, like how is reflective. You're not sure of what it means. Means yes, or means no. And the comments were just full of people saying, we do that in my language, or it's different in my language. And um, also, you sound like a Minecraft villager. I've never played that before, but apparently it sounds like that. Other people saying that I sound like Siri because I was saying, mm-hmm, at the start, which I did hear. I can hear that. So it went viral for the wrong reasons, to be honest. But yeah, TikTok and Instagram are very different experiences. I much prefer Instagram myself. There's way more of a community vibe, I think. I'm sure if you don't post much on TikTok, you feel the same, but you can keep in contact with people in direct messages and stories, and it's just a lot more wholesome on Instagram. Whereas TikTok can be savage. The comments sometimes on TikTok, and yeah, you shouldn't start TikTok if you've got thin skin, I think.
Exactly.
It's not
Luckily,
for
I've got
me.
a thick skin because
Hmm.
there'll be lots of random videos which will go to the wrong audience, and I'm like, meh, I don't
Hmm.
care. It's not going to change
Hmm.
anything in my life. But no, that was interesting because you might say it was kind of a silly video, but when I watched it, I was like, he's right, you know. It's the same thing, but we say it means so many different things. Hmm? Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Etc.
And it's
Etc.
interesting how it changes in different languages as well. A lot of people commenting that spoke languages are kind of in countries close to the UK, like European languages or, Romance languages, Germanic languages, were saying that it was similar in their language. And then people speaking, things like Japanese, Vietnamese further afield were saying that it was completely different in their language. And then also with languages like Chinese, some Chinese speakers commented saying, that they have a tonal language anyway. So saying or would just change the meaning of the word completely for them, that they don't use tones like that to show a different meaning, of a certain word. It's actually just changes the word completely. So that was interesting to hear feedback from people speaking different languages with these mm-hms. But yeah.
Awesome. Now, let's finish off with one final question. Because you've moved back to the UK, you're now in Manchester. You mentioned you've been there, what, for 6 months, something like
Yeah,
that?
about 6 months now. Yeah.
Um, how's it been returning to the UK after so long? What's life like now?
It's been great, to be honest with you. After 10 years abroad, I think I just missed home comforts a little bit, getting back to a routine of seeing old friends. I went to university in Manchester, so I still have a network of people that I know here. And I think, yeah, after living daily life in a second language in French or Japanese for so many years, it's just been relaxing to be able to speak English with people, not be thinking about language. And also for setting up my business, for setting up Grow Your English, it's been nice to be able to focus on that and not on any kind of linguistic journey as a learner. So it doesn't mean that I'm, going to stay here forever. Potentially, I still travel a bit more again, or I don't know where to. That's for the future to be decided. But for now, I'm really enjoying being back in the UK, getting back in contact with old friends, and yeah, just not focusing on speaking in a second language for a bit. Because after 10 years, and just needed a little break from
Finally relax. 10 years later.
that. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, that's it then. Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if we used any advanced words or phrases that you didn't quite get, feel free to write a comment, and we'd be more than happy to clear up any doubts you might have. And check out Jamie's content as well and his multiple podcasts about different stuff. And Jamie, thanks once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. So, have a great day and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.